Hi, welcome to Towards the Moon. I'm Christina Engelhardt, and in today's series, we're going to be talking about Venus, the planet Venus, in each zodiac sign and passing through each house. So let me explain what Venus is. Obviously, we've all understood that Venus is the planet of love, beauty, art, femininity, also intuition. It can be art. It can be even passion. Truly, a Venus is the love planet, and friendship included. And you know, they say you can exist without love and beauty, but you cannot truly live without love and beauty and compassion and all the elements of Venus. So we're going to speak about how important Venus is. Of course, love and friendship really move and inspire our spirit to be kind and to one another. And of course, you know, it's as so far as saying we can even decorate our homes and decorate ourselves and beautify ourselves, not just the love of beauty, but unto oneself. So let me start with Venus in the constellation of Aries. So we know that Aries is a planet that is ruled by Mars. So this Venus has a Mars aspect to it, a Mars feel to it. So Venus, which is love and beauty, now with the sign of Mars energy in Aries, we have obviously people, anyone who has Venus in Aries, these are very passionate people, very gung-ho. Actually, I don't want to say aggressive, but if they see something they want, they will go for it. So there is a great determination, but it's also a restless sign. And as much as Venus, believe it or not, can be restless, if you're not in a relationship, you feel that great need. But at the same time, there's also a realm that, because it has a leadership quality of Mars, that you can lead through Venus. So I would think that anyone who would be in the arts, who would be a designer, or an innovator, that would be a wonderful aspect to have Venus in Mars. Now let's talk about having Venus in the first house. The first house is how you see yourself. I like to call it the front door. It is the house of self. So obviously, anytime I've ever done a chart and I see Venus on the ascendant, that's going to be some good-looking person, because Venus is beauty, art, and just alone that it's on the first house, how you see yourself and how others see you, usually that indicates beauty. Now, if it is negatively aspected, or let's call it challengingly aspected, the Venus on the ascendant might just mean that you need to constantly be, I don't want to say the word obsessed, but, you know, the constantly reassuring or checking the mirror, or am I attractive enough? Did I put my makeup together? So appearances will be so incredibly important, to the point where if you don't feel looking right, you won't feel you'll have the same effect. And of course, with Venus, the whole idea is, you know, really love and beauty. You want to get beyond being just seen for your value. So once again, Venus in the first house is very opinionated about oneself's look and design. And of course, the world and your environment has to be as beautiful as you can make it. Now let's move on to Venus in Taurus. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. So now we have Venus in its own sign. It's in its rulership. So Venus likes to be in Taurus. Now Taurus, because it's a sign of beauty, and here we have beauty in its own, and the part of the body here is the voice. I find that people who have Venus in Taurus particularly have a knack for beautifying themselves, and can be naturally very attractive in their own right, because it's just a super dose of Venus. And by having Venus with Taurus, the nature of your friends. Now, sometimes Taurus has, I don't want to say possessive, but, you know, they like to claim this is mine and I'm going to make it the way I see it fit in art, beauty, sensation. So I find that if your Venus is in Taurus, don't be too possessive. Trust that you are naturally attractive, because it comes as a great gift to you. Venus in Taurus is a wonderful gift to have, and if we can, as I said, if it's negatively impacted, the natural aspect of being possessive can heighten. And if it's positively aspect, then you might have a very beautiful voice too, because Taurus rules the throat and the voice. Venus there, you might have a God-sent gifted voice. And if anything, have a lot of nice things to say, or, poetry, or even the performing arts is important because you want to make an impact with your voice. Now let's talk about Venus in the second house. So the second house is the house of money, finance, what you value, your income, and things that you own like property. So of course, Venus, art, love, and beauty, and compassion in the house of money. When I see someone with Venus in the second house of money, they're probably going to be very lucky in their finances. And if not, they'll be interior decorators, designer, artists, because you can make your money in the realm of the artistic beauty, design. So that comes actually naturally, or even, as I said, the voice. You make money by speaking and using your voice. So all those are very good attributes. If Venus is, however, in a challenging aspect, being in the second house, in whatever constellation, you might find that that money is the end all. And if you're not with a certain amount of finance, if you don't feel that you have the right car, the right dress, the right environment around you, you might doubt yourself and think that it's all based on appearances. And of course, the expression, the grass is greener on the other side, we want to remind Venus in the second house that if we stay with our artistic, our values, and we personalize them, we can have a very, very successful aspect of just having Venus in the second house. So now let's move to Venus in Gemini. So we know that Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So here we have a Venus with the Mercurian flavor, which is great for communications as well, for writing, love stories, love romances, and of course friendships, having many, many friends, because Venus is love, art, and beauty, and Gemini also appreciates its friends, its values of communicating with others and being very social. So we will have a very social Venus, lot to say. Now, where Taurus was the voice, Gemini is speaking, just the art of speaking and having a lot to say. Journalists, newscasters, people who are presenters, salesmen, these are all people who just love to have something to say, and that comes natural. Now, Gemini in itself often rules brothers and sisters, so Venus in Gemini can often mean, depending if it's negatively or positively influenced, relationships with their siblings that could be quite significant. And once again, Venus in Gemini are good chatterboxes, and they love to, be careful, here's a negative, gossip. So just the love of having something to say, we have to be very careful of being the subject of gossip or being one who gossips. Now let's talk about Venus in the third house. So the third house is the house of writing, journalism, your early education, communications, and the form of even sales, just presentation, verbally. It's a very good speaking sign. And so, of course, if you have Venus in the third house, well, you're probably going to be a writer. You're probably going to be someone who is at least doing a lot of on camera, online, just so important to have your presentation out. And the third house also rules brothers and sisters. So once again, Venus in the third house is, depending if it's whatever constellation, how it is challenged, or if it's any in rulership or exalted, you'll find that your relationships with your siblings are very important. And you'll also find yourself a natural teacher, a natural speaker, and a natural salesman. So Venus is quite at home and very communicative in the third house. And if anything, these are people who actually like to go out and have a lot of fun. I always find Venus in the third house is an activated and a curious Venus. Maybe sometimes a variety of love affairs, known to want to be with their friends first and foremost. Now let's talk about Venus in Cancer. So Cancer, we know, is ruled by the moon. So when Venus is in the sign of Cancer, we have a very emotional Venus. So now we're coming to Venus in a cardinal sign, very strong. But I find that when Venus is in Cancer, we can easily get our feelings hurt, because Cancers are very sensitive and they have that hard shell on the outside, but of course soft as anything can be on the inside. I find people, when their Venus is in Cancer, they act tough. They act like this great shield is on them. But if you say one wrong thing, or one thing that just gets them in the right way or hits their emotions, they are mush, in the sense of they just open up and spill their guts, and they can be quite sweet and sensitive. But you have to kind of work your way to get to that part, because Venus in Cancer, when they get beyond that shield or that shell, they are some of the sweetest people, highly emotional, sometimes oversensitive. And of course, Cancer is a mothering, nurturing sign. So I find people with Venus in Cancer love to nurture, love to cook. Great chefs have Venus in Cancer. People who are devoted in nurturing as well, either teachers or educators, for the sake of, but young children in particularly, because there's that whole nurturing quality that is just so wonderful. Now, if Venus is on an aspect that's more challenging with Cancer, once again, you could be hypersensitive, where everything just seems to just trigger you. So we want to find that, I say to my Venus in Cancer friends, that, you know, a good swim in the pool, a hot bath, a cup of tea, just soothing oneself, and maybe doing a little meditation will help quell the anxiousness that might come just from having Venus in Cancer. But otherwise, it is a very loving, very nurturing Venus. Now let's talk about Venus in the 4th house. The 4th house is the house of home, soul, mother, the roots of your being, and your interconnectedness with mother, either being a mother or your relationship with your mother, and so forth. So I find Venus in the 4th house. Now, here are people who they love their home, or at least they want to have a relationship with their home, and of course mother, the great nurturer. I find people who have a strong Venus in the 4th house are naturally involved in interior decorating, architecture, design, also real estate. So that comes quite natural for Venus in the 4th house. And also I find that because Venus is such a feminine sign, and being in the 4th house, which is a kind of a feminine house, that you might find yourself with a lot of female friends. And they are very, very important for you. Both as a man and as a woman, you might find yourself with a lot of female friends. And because the 4th house kind of rules the stomach area, here again, you could be a chef, you could be someone who likes to please through cooking, or at least it's a great hobby of yours. So that's Venus in the 4th house. Now let's move to Venus in Leo. So Leo is ruled by the sun. The sun is bright, energetic. And so here we have Venus in Leo. I find that when Venus is in Leo, here are the actors, the performers, the showmen, the onstage, the models, the people who can strut their stuff and enjoy it with all bravada. And Venus in Leo, sometimes, now here's where the challenging come in. I don't want to say stuck up, but they are so self-assured of themselves that if you don't think so, it doesn't matter. Leo knows they're fantastic. And if you hit them or hurt them in any kind of way, you probably will lose a friend for life, because Leos are so loyal. And if a Venus is in Leo, I usually say to people, if you're married to someone with Venus in Leo, the tendency is to be extremely loyal. So if you're married to a Venus in Leo, or you are Venus in Leo, you want loyalty, absolutely, and you also want faithfulness, because that's very, very important. So I say that to all my Venus in Leos, faithfulness. Make sure you pick a good mate who appreciates that of you and respects that of you, because here is a Venus that needs to be respected for its and complimented. It's very important. If you're with the Venus in Leo and you're not giving them any compliments, or you're not receiving any compliments, that's going to kind of set you off, because you know that that really is part of your shine. Now let's talk about Venus in the 5th house. Now the 5th house is the house of creativity, self-expression, children, love affairs. So when I see Venus in the 5th house, wow, we are going, and depending on whatever constellation, but just to have Venus in the 5th house children, love affairs, the arts, the entertainment, and also if you're not an actor, you're someone who definitely is in the arts, but I see more stage and theater, very much presentation. So Venus is very well aspected in the 5th house. And of course, if it's got in positive planets, or it's in a realm of good planets, we'll have great relationships with children. We'll have, a great aspecting ability to shine and show our presentation, and quite a few love affairs. If your Venus in the 5th house is a challenged aspect, we might delay maybe too long to have children. We might find that we're going through a series of love affairs that we're just not feeling the appreciation. So I would say Venus in a challenging aspect in the 5th house, we might have to take a really look at what kind of people, what kind of patterns you're picking, because you might be remembering old aspects of your own childhood and still needing the love reassured from that. So this is where I find also teachers and healers dealing with young people, teenagers, and that early youth when big crushes and love affairs start happening. And it's highly, highly creative. Venus in the 5th house. Quite lovely place to be. So lucky you if you have Venus in the 5th house. Now let's move to Venus in Virgo. So here we have Venus in its least favorable sign, and I'll tell you why. Because Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Well, Mercury in its own right is fine with Venus. They're like siblings. They get along fine. However, Virgo has a tendency to do a lot of self-examination and can be sometimes self-critical, if not to oneself, then to others. So here is where Venus wants to kind of expand, and the Virgo is looking kind of into the microscope and picking things apart, and this kind of breaking things up and categorizing. And sometimes it's very hard for Venus to always be categorizing. Now, if your Venus is in Virgo, this doesn't mean you're not a loving person. On the contrary, I find very sexy people have Venus in Virgo, but it's always in the process of your mind. You're always thinking of love, of love. And of course, love wants to be felt. So get that love out of your mind and make sure you're focusing on the feeling aspect and not intellectualizing love. And, is this always right or wrong? It's not so much about love being right or wrong, or, if it's this or that. It's more like, how does it feel? And of course, Virgo sometimes has a tendency to be superiority, inferiority, when it is, that would be a challenging aspect. Venus in Virgo with any challenging aspects, that would mean you need to sometimes think before you speak. Now, here's where the thinking comes in mind, because your natural tendency might to say to someone right away, what you like or don't like, and sometimes we need to do some better listening. So if your Venus is in Virgo, you're probably a very sexy person, because that is one thing. You're a great thinker of love. If anything, you're a great feeler of love through the healing aspects, because Virgos like to take care of people. They actually have that. And if you have your Venus in Virgo, doctors and nurses and great healers on that level. So it's not to be taken in a negative sense. It's just that it is often, you think so much of it that it becomes like the first thought of the day. So let's talk about now Venus in the 6th house. So the 6th house is the house of health, healing, service work. So Venus in the house of work, you better have a job that you love, because Venus in the 6th house really depends and values its work. So if you have Venus in the 6th house and you don't like your job, you have to really take now a good look at and really examine, where am I the strongest, because it is important. Now, it's also the house of service and work. So that's why I say earlier that Venus does very well with doctors and nurses and healing practitioners, nutritionalists, and everyone that can assimilate the healing process in a very kind, loving, nurturing way. So Venus is fine in the house of health, healing, service work. But once again, if it's your work and you have Venus there, positively aspect, boy, if you have a job you love, you're going to stick with it, because there's a tendency to have longevity with Venus in Virgo. Because if you're not bored and you find that it's a challenging work and it keeps you interesting and there's lots to do, because it's a mental sign, it's a busy, place to have Venus, then you will have a fabulous job. If it is challenged or at a square or in any such a way, that means it might have to take ourselves really some time to find and really take the time to assimilate what kind of work we want to do, how we want to heal, and therefore we'll feel good about ourselves because Venus is fine. And actually you can have some pretty good health with Venus there. Now let's go up the meridian. We're going to talk about Venus in Libra. Now here again, Venus is in its rulership sign because Libra is ruled by Venus. And where is the Venus? In Libra. So that's a good fit. Now they call this Venus, because it's an air sign, Libra, they call it a intellectual love. Whereas Taurus was a possessive love, here we have a rulership Venus in Libra, and now it is an air sign. And of course, Libra rules relationships. And so I find if your Venus is in Libra, your relationships with friends, family, with your work compatibilities. And when I say work, because, you know, partnerships are not just marriage, they can be friendships, they can be business. So who you really align yourself. I find Venus in Libra a lovely place to have it. It's not so overly sensitive as other places. It is a more balanced place. Now, if your Venus is positively aspected in Libra, yes, you will feel that you come on board into the relationship, always trying to put things back in balance and seeking that. If it is challenged by any kind of squares or oppositions, you might find that a relationship can easily set you off, and you might find that you lose balance, that you might find yourself needing a relationship or wanting a relationship, and one that is not well aspected for you can actually set you back. So it's important for Venus in Libra to be well aspected in their love lives and take the time to really examine what that is for oneself, because your great need to, since it's an intelligent Venus, you want to be in a sign or connected with somebody who really understands you. So that's very, very important. Now let's talk about Venus in the 7th house. Now the 7th house is the house of marriage and partnership, alliance with others. I like to call it the house of the others. So when Venus is in the 7th house, wow, and we're going up in the meridian, we're starting to stretch and we're trying to go out into the world. I find that Venus loves to be in the 7th house because you will be thinking often, who am I married to? Who am I going to get married to? Now, if it's challenging aspect, you might be somebody, because we don't know what constellation it's in, you will know when you do your chart, that as much as marriage can be important, if it's challenged, you might decide that you're a professional bachelor and you want to love everyone. That's the ability to love so greatly. But generally, I find Venus in the 7th house is someone who, if well married, well partnered in business and the likes, do very, very well, and they find themselves quite happy. Now, if it's, as I said, positively aspect, we can track love and we get fed through it. If it's challenged, we might find that relationships are a bit on the roller coaster side, because as much as we want them, sometimes they can be pushed aside. And Venus does not like to be alone and single in the 7th house. So we have to kind of pay attention to finding planets that will encourage and create those wonderful relationships that I wish for you. Now let's talk about Venus in Scorpio. So we know that Scorpio is ruled both by Mars and by Pluto. So I find when Venus is in Scorpio, yes, it's a water sign, and it is highly emotionally intelligent. Because the thing about Scorpio is a sign of transition. So if you have your Venus in Scorpio, you kind of want to mate for life. But if that person you're with gives you any reason for doubt, any reason for jealousy, any reason for suspicion, watch out. Because Venus in Scorpio can be unrelenting, and, you know, they are not going to give you a break. They demand honesty. They want so much honesty that they have to give it first and foremost themselves, but they demand it of their partners and their mates. And it's a very passionate, it's a very sexy place to be. Venus in Scorpio are some of the sexiest people around. But they have to be faithful. And I know they certainly demand it. And you never want to piss off a Venus in Scorpio because they can be vindictive. And I wouldn't want that to happen. Now, particularly if it's negatively aspected, then be careful, watch out for your own nature, because we don't do very well with betrayal. Actually, Venus in Scorpio, it's a done deal. You feel you've been slighted, finished, finito. Venus in Scorpio won't put up with it. So if your Venus is in Scorpio, find signs that are the most nurturing and find people who are very trustworthy, because you have to have that on your own right as well. And once you attract it for yourself, you can have actually a very passionate relationship. Now let's talk about Venus in the 8th house. So the 8th house is the house of sex, death, rebirth, transformation, other people's money. So I find when Venus is in the 8th house, and I said other people's money, then I find that people who are great investors, people who know how to really move money around, who work with great charities and who work with foundations, that comes natural, because Venus in whatever constellation, just that it's in the 8th house and it's a mystic house, getting involved in organizations that are really helpful and raise money for those who are less fortunate, particularly animals, particularly the arts or beautiful things that you want a restoration. I find Venus in the 8th house is fabulous for restoration as well, repairing things for their own sense of beauty. Now, because it's a house of sex, here we have a very sexy Venus. Now, well aspected, sexy for sure. Challenged aspect, the sex might come up and down. We might have bouts of we're in a great sexual relationship, and then other times we might feel none at all or quite monkness. In the sense of when I say being a monk, you might be looking so long for such a perfect person that you can spend a long time without a relationship. Usually I find Venus in the 8th house are people who their relationships are so very important and their sex appeal is so heightened that relationships are utmost important. Now, because it's also the sign, as I say, transition, transformation, I find that people who are, believe it or not, have Venus in the 8th house can be surgeons who do plastic surgery, who do cosmetic makeovers, and the whole need to beautify, reconfigure, and transform art and beauty. Great artists can have Venus in the 8th house because there's just such a need to be like Picasso or in your own right, just so avant-garde in your ability to be sensible and sensitive to love. So if you have Venus in the 8th house, you're a very unique person, and love affairs are so important, and you'll probably have a very dynamic lifestyle for sure. Now let's talk about Venus in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system, so expansive, jovial Venus. I find when Venus is in Sagittarius, you are friends with everyone. Actually, I find, unfortunately, they say Venus in Sagittarius, I'm not going to say you're not able to be faithful, but you are so interested in having as many relationships or certainly experiences as possible because you think big on everything. And Venus in Sag, they make fabulous friends, but sometimes they turn their love affairs into friends and they turn their friends into love affairs. So just remember, if you are that way, that's fine, that's wonderful, but you might have someone who really wants to fall in love with you and you just keep them in the friend zone. And you might have someone who you want to show up and you want to love them and they put you in the friend zone. So it could go either way. But I usually find that Venus in Sag have quite a few lovers, and they certainly have a great, I don't want to call them wanderlust, but sometimes known as the wandering eye. If you are with the Venus in Virgo person, or you have Venus in Virgo, I like to say, put your passions in love and education, in the adventures of the world, because Sagittarius like to move around a lot. They're the travelers. So maybe we can have a great love of travel and adventure, and therefore fulfill that great need. And it's actually it's a very lovely place to, some of my best friends have Venus in Sagittarius because they're some of the funniest people around. They love comedy, they love expansion, and they're quite fearless in letting you know exactly what's on their mind. They sometimes speak before they think, but that makes them great entertainers as well. So now let's talk about Venus in the ninth house. And what is the ninth house? The ninth house is the house of education, publication, foreign travel, foreign languages, adventures, and philosophy. So I find that when Venus is in the ninth house, we love to learn. The learning will never end. And the curiosity to go out into the world. You might be in the travel business. You might be an educator of language. You might be a professor. You might have really not just said, oh, a master's or a bachelor's is good enough. You might want to have a doctorate's degree, because there's a great reassurance of oneself that you have taken your ability to value yourself as much as you can. So there's that great need to be highly educated, and you're probably multilingual for sure, because there's that great love to communicate. So if your Venus is in the ninth house, you're going to love to travel, you're going to love to explore, you're going to be very curious. Now, if it's challenged in any aspect, we might find ourselves not traveling, but then pick up a book and go on the websites that you can and learn as much as you can of languages and also history. Great history buffs, I find, are in Venus in the ninth house. So learn away, great philosophy, great curious people for the know-how, and to, if anything, I could think of astronauts would have a strong Venus in the ninth house, because they go where no one else has gone. They're very curious in that realm. So that's Venus in the ninth. Now let's talk about Venus in Capricorn. So first of all, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is a serious sign. So when Venus is in Capricorn, these are people who marry for life. They or married to their career. They don't want so much change, because I like to say when there's strong Saturn energies, it's like stepping on the brakes. It slows things down and it makes things very serious. So if you have Venus in Capricorn, you might take yourself very seriously, or you might be seen as someone very responsible, very family oriented, someone who might be a bit of a workaholic or pick their work over other things. If you can keep the two together, do things that you love to do in your work, you're a happy Venus in Capricorn. Because Capricorns like to strive to their highest ambitions. Great CEOs, great presidents, great electoral people who need to be honored and valued will have Venus in Capricorn. They're quite serious people, so if you're with a Venus in Capricorn, you don't want to let them down, because they actually take things so seriously that they might kind of shut you out and not speak for a long time. They might do that quiet technique. And sometimes it's easier just to have the argument than to have someone give you the silent treatment. So Venus in Capricorn, well aspected, is a great serious family member. Challenge, you might be a bachelor for a long time because you want somebody who kind of gets you in every aspect. Now let's talk about Venus in the 10th house. So the 10th house is the house of reputation, honor, career, father, and how you are seen in the outer world. So Venus in the 10th house, depending on whatever sign it's in, we have someone, again, as I mentioned, the 10th house is a career house. And you want to arrive to have the value of, if Venus, love, beauty, art is in the 10th house career, you probably have a business or run a corporation that has to do everything with art, beauty, museums. It has to do with evaluation, projects, properties. Even architects will do very well, because it's a house that likes to build and create. And here we have Venus well aspected. If it is, then we'll have a great success in our careers, and we'll be very proud. And the relationships with our fathers are very important. Now, if it's in a challenging aspect, Venus in the 10th house, we might have to go through several careers to find the right one. But when that one sticks and it feels good, stay with it, work with it, and always be able to know that being solid and expressive and liking what you do, that's wonderful for having Venus in the 10th house. Now let's talk about Venus in Aquarius. So Aquarius is a nonconformist, highly intelligent. It rules ruled by Uranus, and that's when I say unconventional, because Uranus does not like to be fenced in or hemmed in or told what they can and cannot do. They kind of make their own rules. So if your Venus is in Aquarius, you're going to be a very unique person. And you'll have a ton of friends, because one thing Aquarius love are friends. They really value their friends. And of course, they usually end up telling their friends how they want things done, because they see things so uniquely like no one else has. And if your Venus is an Aquarius, you'll be, I don't want to say unusual lover, but you'll have a way of being, I like to say it's almost like ambidextrous. You can do anything in love. You can turn your love affairs into friends, very much like Sagittarius did. But first and foremost, Venus and Aquarius want to have freedom. So I think if you have your Venus in Aquarius, most important that the people you love are also your best friends. I find that's very, very important. But they got to give you a long leash, because you don't want to be seen or criticized too harshly, because then Uranus energy spits out, and you might say, oh, no, I have to do things my way. So very, very important. Now, if Venus is positively aspected in Aquarius, people will follow you, kind of like a guru, because you do things so uniquely that everyone just is enamored with that electric energy that you send forth. If your Venus is in a challenging aspect in Aquarius, you might be a loner sometimes in love, because you might think that really nobody understands or gets you, because you have this unique aspect. But I find that Venus in Aquarius makes some of the most fun. They're great fun to have, but you got to follow their way of doing things, because they just are so clever. Now let's talk about Venus in the 11th house. The 11th house is the house of hopes, wishes, friends, dreams, goals. And if you have Venus there, your dreams, you're a dreamer. For sure, you're a dreamer. And I would say definitely take down and express your dreams, because these are great visionaries. Venus in the 11th house are visionaries. They are able to work with massive groups of people, corporations, and somehow management comes very important, because you do very well. Venus in the 11th house, you do well with groups of people, sometimes a little bit better than you're even one-on-one. It's sometimes a little awkward. It's almost intimidating, because all the pressure's on you when you do so well in the masses, and you can kind of reach out to a whole audience of people. Now, Venus in the 11th house, yes, we know, great with friends, very important, your dreams, your hopes. Venus lives for its hopes. So if you have Venus in the 11th house, go for what you dream for. Go with what your hopes are. And if it means that you have to educate yourself, if it means that you have to go out into the world, whatever it is, it's very, very important. Venus in the 11th house, who their friends are. Now, if it's positively aspected, fabulous friends. If it's challenging aspect, kind of be careful some of the friends you are. You can't just attract everyone or anyone, because you might find that they might be taking too much of you, and sometimes friends can overwhelm you or seem like false friends. So make sure these are real friends and not false friends. So last but not least, we are here now, Venus in Pisces. So Venus in Pisces is exalted. Now, I have to say, I've always wondered why. I understand, because of course Pisces is ruled by Neptune, and in Neptune is the sign of compassion, but it's also the sign of illusion, delusion, and it's a little nebulous, and it's also sacrifice. So this is where Venus must give up of the self and be for the others in a humanitarian way. So Venus is a great giver, a great sacrifice. Venus will take the shirt off his back and give it to you. That's how lovely they are. And in that sense, I think it is an exalted sign, because the giving is without filters. And I often find that Venus with Pisces is so loving that sometimes you have to be careful of feeling the victim or being victimized or feeling taken advantage of, because you have such a kind nature to yourself. Very good for actors, very good for musicians, very good for the arts. Fabulous, because you kind of open your spirit up every time you show love, you reach out to people, or you do your work or your projects, your creativity. So Venus in Pisces are some of the most creative people, some of the most loving people, but they have a tendency to feel that they are, that they can be taken advantage of, because they give sometimes too much, and they can try to rescue everyone that they meet. And you have to be careful. Not everyone is there for you. So if I say to my Venus and Pisces friends, filter out who these friends are. Yes, you want to save every puppy and every kitten and be such a giver, and that's quite wonderful. But remember, you're very sensitive. And I would say, if anything, go into your poetry, into your music, go into your arts, because there you can be true to yourself and you can find what that real connection is with Venus in Pisces. Now let's talk about Venus in the 12th house. So the 12th house is a house of ultimate understanding. When I say understanding, I mean this is where we get to fix our karma. This is where it's a dark house. I like to call it the closet, because that's where we get to things last. It's the last house, and that's why when we get to the 12th house, when Venus is there, I find it is some of the deepest feeling people, but you can feel sometimes lonely and isolated. If it is difficultly aspected, loneliness and not being in a relationship will surely trigger you, because Venus in the 12th house are the people who work behind the scenes. Now, great artists, great directors, great photographers, great filmmakers, they know how to work behind the scenes and have a vision for others. And this is where they get to have their ultimate understanding, because they get to portray what the meaning is. So I find that comes very natural to Venus in the 12th house. So another thing with Venus in the 12th house, it is also the sign of charity, hospitals, institutions, even prisons. So you might find yourself being very charitable to those institutions. And you might find yourself knowing someone you care for and love who is in that situation. So I say to Venus in the 12th house, you are a very deep feeling person. Maybe your spiritual nature needs not only music and the arts, but maybe it needs to meditate. Maybe it needs to have a great profound nature, a very deep spiritual nature. And you might need to go back into your ancestry and find out the patterns. And be careful, also it can be addictions. We want to be very careful that we don't know when to stop, and we can take control. And Venus doesn't like to be controlled. And the 12th house is not necessarily a controlling house, but we can lose oneself. So because it's a house of understanding, we have to understand ourselves first. We have to love ourselves first. And that's why I say we can exist without love, but we surely can't live truly without love. So I send everyone a big loving Venus salute, and thank you for listening. And don't forget to look towards the moon. And remember, Venus, from my heart to yours, I wish everyone a great love, and thank you all for watching.